Okay, moving on to the next segment of today's show. This is always a topic I like to do around this time of year, and that is NBA draft decisions. And before I start this segment, I just wanted to say, I totally know that I'm just a college kid, a random guy that's aspiring to be a sports analyst, and if these kids really think that whatever decision they're going to make is the best for them, then I totally support them making that decision. I said it, I spoke about it a little bit a couple podcasts ago when I was talking about Jalen Green and the fact that he was going pro right away instead of playing college basketball. I totally understand that in some cases you just want to make money for your family. All of the 8 guys I'm about to talk about are all very good and very talented basketball players, and if they want to go to the NBA, it's fine. I totally support their decision. All of them are very talented, but I want to talk about what I would do if I were them and the potential impact that each of them are going to have on their team. And the first guy I want to talk about will go to the SEC is Isaiah Joe from the University of Arkansas. And when you look at Arkansas going into this offseason, I did think that they were going to have a chance to be one of the best teams in all of college basketball next year. But unfortunately, but rightfully so for him, Mason Jones decided to enter the NBA draft after averaging 22 points per game last year. He was unbelievable. And even though I was biasly hoping he was coming back, I know that Mason Jones is going to be a stud in the NBA. In terms of their second guy, though, Isaiah Joe. Isaiah Joe averaged about 17 points per game last year, 4 rebounds per game last year, and shot about 34% from 3. I would totally understand why Isaiah Joe would want to go to the NBA. He's going to be a junior this year. Probably would be a second-round pick, and he could really shoot the ball, and his game really fits the modern-day NBA. But what I will say is this. Arkansas losing Mason Jones is going to need a top dog. And I do think if Isaiah Joe were to stay and have another great season, along with Vance Jackson, along with Connor Vanover, then Arkansas and Isaiah Joe, not only is Arkansas going to be better next year, but I think Isaiah Joe has a chance to rise his stock. Because keep in mind, Arkansas last year was basically playing a 6-man. They were like the Nevada team from 17-18 that was playing like 6 guys and didn't have any size when Lindsey Drew got hurt. Like, they had no size. They were playing 6 guys, and they still played really fast and effectively and found the way to win. I think Isaiah Joe and Arkansas next year could be even better because they have transfers. They have more bodies. They have Connor Vanover coming in, the transfer from Cal. He's like 7'3" and could really shoot the ball. So I think Arkansas is going to play really fast next year, along with the other transfer from New Mexico, Vance Jackson. I think if I were Isaiah Joe, if I wanted to raise my stock, I'd probably stay and see what I could do for Arkansas next season. Okay, moving on to the next player I want to talk about, and we will head to the Big 12. And the team that I think, if the NCAA tournament would have happened last year, would have won the NCAA tournament. This team would have been my pick to win the NCAA tournament, and that is Baylor. And I want to talk about their starting point guard, Jared Butler. Butler is a kid that averaged 16 points a game, 3.2 rebounds per game, 3.1 assists per game, and shot 38% from 3. And I got to tell you, this kid is one of my favorite players in college basketball. And once again, this is the tough thing with talking about the NBA draft. If Jared Butler comes back to Baylor next year and joins MaCio Teague, who's currently technically in the NBA draft, he entered the draft, but I think odds are he's going to be coming back. Davion Mitchell will be back. Unfortunately, they lose Freddie Gillespie, but they bring back Mark Vital, one of the more underrated players in the country. They lose Devontae Bandu as well, but Matthew Meyer will be back, and he'll be looking to take a bigger step. And talking about Jared Butler, this is a kid that dropped 30-plus points at Allen Fieldhouse as a freshman and followed it up his sophomore year by balling out. I had high expectations for Jared Butler going into the 19-20 season, but I think he even exceeded them himself. He's an awesome player, and he's another guy. If he wants to go to the NBA, fine. He's good enough to do it. There are plenty of players that entered the NBA draft that are going to leave college that I think Jared Butler is better than. And not only better than, clearly better than. And kind of similar to Isaiah Joe. Selfishly, I think if he comes back to school, Baylor will be and should be a top 3 team in the preseason. I think they're that good, and I think Scott Drew is that good of a coach. But if he doesn't come back, I understand why. I think he's good enough to play in the NBA. I think kind of similar to Isaiah Joe, he'll be a second-round pick, and Baylor just won't be as good as they would have been, obviously, if he would have came back. But at the same time, I think Jared Butler is another kid where right now he's projected to be like a second-round pick. I think if he comes back and plays well, he could maybe even be a first-round pick. So I would give very similar advice to Jared Butler as I did to Isaiah Joe. Let's go to the Big Ten now, and I want to talk about Illinois. And everyone kind of assumed going into this offseason that their starting point guard, Ayo Dosunmu, was going to be declaring for the NBA draft. If you remember, Dosunmu declared for the NBA draft last year, went through the whole process and everything, but actually announced that he thought it would be best for him to come back, like, literally at the last second. And after seeing that, I kind of thought to myself, okay, like, he's just automatically going to be gone. And he did declare for the draft, but he still has his eligibility left, which is a little interesting. But Ayo is not the Illinois player I want to talk about today. That is Kofi Cookburn. And Kofi was a freshman last year. He's from New York, and I've seen him since high school. I didn't expect him to be this good. He averaged 13.3 points per game and 8.8 rebounds per game. That is unreal. He had an awesome season, and I could definitely see him wanting to leave for the NBA. At the same time, though, I don't necessarily know if his game is designed for the modern-day NBA. He didn't make a three last season, which isn't his fault. He's a great, strong, big basketball player. But at the same time, I don't know how well his game is going to translate. If I'm Kofi, I actually think I'm going to go. Because even though Illinois is going to be very good next year if I do come back, even without Ayo, bringing back the core of Georgie and Trent Frazier and Andres Feliz, I just don't necessarily know if you could repeat and have as good of a season as you had last year, this year, and, be drafted. Right now, Kofi projection would probably get drafted. If I was Kofi, I would leave. But if he wants to come back, I do think Illinois could be very good next season. Okay, when I was talking about Baylor, I said that if Jared Butler came back, there would be a legit argument, and I would put Baylor in terms of one of my top 3 or 4 teams in all of college basketball heading into the preseason next year. I'll give you another team that the situation is like that. That is Gonzaga. Filip Petrusev, a guy that averaged 17.5 points per game and 8 rebounds per game. Corey Kispert, one of their better players from last year, averaged 14 points a game last year and shot 44% from 3. And Joel Ayayi, who averaged 10.5 points per game last year, 34.5% from 3. Very good player. All 3 of those guys are currently debating if they should leave early for the NBA draft or not. And I do believe that if those 3 guys come back and you pair them along with Jalen Suggs and Drew Timme, Gonzaga should be the number 1 team in the preseason next year. I told you Baylor should be a top 3 team. I will confirm it that if those 3 guys, Petrusev, a big man that could really score and, he's so polished, Kispert, one of the best pure three-point shooters in all of college basketball, and Ayayi, a point guard that if he comes back this year is going to have a chance to play a little more off the ball because they have Jalen Suggs coming in. I think this Gonzaga team could be scary, scary good. And the crazy thing is, they were scary, scary good last year, and they were scary, scary good the year before. Going over each situation individually, if anyone is going to leave, I think it is going to be Petrusev. He was their leading scorer last year. He has had NBA buzz for a little while now. He did shoot 18.2% from 3 last year, kind of similar to Kofi. I think he would probably have to increase that a little bit if he wants a legit shot. But Kispert is made for the NBA, man. He just chucks threes and they go in, and Ayayi is very dynamic. He has great court vision. If I were to guess, I think Kispert and Ayayi come back. I do not think Petrusev does, but I'd understand if really any of them go. Kispert has been he was a freshman on that team with Rue, not the team that had that beat Duke. He was a freshman the year before that. Or talking about Kispert, yeah. He was a freshman on the team with Jonathan Williams when they had who else was on that? Not Nigel Williams-Goss, but Jonathan Williams was on that team. They also had Rui was a good player on that team. I'll have to do my research, but that Gonzaga team was really good, and Kispert wasn't really that much of a playmaker for them, and all of a sudden, he's turned into just an awesome, awesome player, and if they could bring back Ayayi as well, he was a surprise last year, he was really good. Gonzaga is going to be right back at the top of the WCC, and Mark Few is one of the more underrated coaches in all of college basketball. I will continue saying that until the cows come home. The players I was forgetting about, well, Tilly had an awesome year. That was probably his best year in college basketball. They had Norvell. They had Josh Perkins as well. Silas Melson was a senior. So that Gonzaga team was really good. But moving on to the next team I want to talk about, and this is a player that was actually spoken about on this podcast a couple weeks ago, and that is Tyrell Terry at Stanford. And Terry right now, I would say out of all the guys I have on this list, would have the best shot at being a first-round pick, and that's why I'm a little that's why I think he's probably going to end up leaving. But at the same time, I spoke a lot about Stanford on this podcast when Zaire Williams a couple weeks ago on Easter announced that he was committing. Like, this Stanford team, if Tyrell Terry comes back, should be a preseason top 20 team, which for their standards is awesome. We all know that Stanford basketball hasn't really been relevant since they knocked Joel Embiid and Andrew Wiggins' college team out of the NCAA tournament. And I know everyone's going to say, isn't that kind of recent? It's already 7 years ago. That's how long we've been here. And Jared Haase, this is going to be year number 6 for him at Stanford, and he still has not made an NCAA tournament. And a lot of Stanford fans are probably going to say, oh, he got off the hook because the team probably would have made it this year. Yes, but at the same time, Stanford's season did not end early for them. They lost in the first round of the Pac-12 tournament to Cal. So I think there would have actually been a decent shot that they wouldn't have made the NCAA tournament. But at the same time, Jared Haase brings in Zaire Williams. That should at least buy him some time. And Tyrell Terry is in an interesting spot because he really flourished this season. He was really much better than any Stanford fan could have expected. And next year, if he comes back, you pair him along with Dejon Davis, along with Spencer Jones, along with Oscar Da Silva, and obviously Zaire. That's going to be a really good and dynamic team. And Tyrell was really Stanford's best player on a team that would have made the NCAA tournament this year. If you bring him in along with the top recruit, that would really help things. I think if I was Tyrell Terry, I would leave just because you're automatically a first-round pick. You're probably going to be a first-round pick. You had such a good season this past year, and your stock is really high. But if he came back, I'd get it. I mean, your team is going to be very good. It's probably going to be the best Stanford team in a while. And if Tyrell Terry does come back, then I do think, his stock definitely has a shot to really improve next season. Okay, moving on to the final early entrant I want to talk about is Xavier Tillman for Michigan State. And Michigan State was a very interesting team this season because we all remember what happened. Going into the season, they were coming in off the big win. They knocked up Duke and Zion Williamson. They brought back Cassius Winston. They brought back Xavier Tillman, who were probably the two mainstays of that team. And even though it was very rocky, eventually by season's end, Michigan State was playing some very good basketball. And I actually want to take a little bit of a deep dive going into their season. I think we're going to do that a little bit more on one of the college basketball podcast episodes. But talking about Michigan State and Xavier Tillman, Cassius Winston was their leader. Unfortunately, he graduated. He will definitely be gone next year. But Rocket Watts played very good towards the back end of last season, especially. Aaron Henry should be back. I know his name is currently in the NBA draft, eligible. He possibly may leave. I don't think he should leave. I think if he comes back, his stock definitely rises with Cassius Winston no longer there. They have Gabe Brown. They have a freshman guard, A.J. Hogwart, who may be taking over for Cassius Winston at point guard. Joey Hauser, the transfer from Marquette, will be in the equation. They have Malik Hall. Kyle Arns graduates, but they have Marcus Bingham. They have Kithier. They have Foster Loyer. So they have some guys. But Xavier Tillman, personally, if I were to predict, I think he leaves. He has 2 kids. He's been at Michigan State for a long time, and he's been awesome the last 2 seasons. There's no doubt about it. Xavier Tillman is a stud. The fact that he averaged 13.7 points a game, 10 rebounds a game, 3 assists a game, and even shot the 3 a little bit. Shot 26% from 3, and had 2 blocks a game. The dude is an absolute stud. And I think he would be a pretty good NBA player. But at the same time, if he comes back, I think Michigan State is a top 10 to 15 team. If he doesn't come back, I think they're a back-end top 25 team. So out of all of the guys I named, and I understand I just really hyped up Tyrell Terry in terms of how Stanford's going to be next season. Like, if Tyrell Terry doesn't come back to Stanford, Stanford should still be a tournament team. They're going to be good, but they obviously won't be great. Gonzaga, if all 3 of their top guys come back that I just talked about, they have a chance to be great. Michigan State, if Tillman comes back, could be like top 10. And I don't think their ceiling is as high as some of the other teams I've mentioned, just because they wouldn't have really that star go-to player like Cassius Winston was. Maybe Aaron Henry or Rocket Watts turns into that guy, or maybe Tillman. We know Tillman is his strength is his all-around game and how much he rebounds and how much he, assists the ball and how much minutes he plays per game. But he does have 1 more year of eligibility left, and this is a guy that has done so much at Michigan State. I'm going to predict he leaves. He has 2 kids. I think it's time for him to make some money, but you really never know. And if he does come back, Michigan State will be top 10, top 15 good next season.